closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. It's been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play or be with their parents and have a good time. I just got off the phone with the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, and we agreed that the hate and the division must stop, and must stop right now. We have to come together as Americans with love for our nation and true affection, really, and I say this so strongly, true affection for each other.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'm your host, Kari Ilonummi. This is the NoSpinNewsSource.com monthly report for September 2017. I'm your host, Kari Ilonummi, and thank you so much for joining us today. Now we start out the show with what would be a message by President Trump. Now ultimately, we've been told in mainstream media recently that our president is racist, bigoted, out of touch. I apologize, I'm sweating like a hog here. It's very hot where I'm at here in the studio. It's a good 80 degrees in this room. So, but nonetheless, I wanted to show you what the president actually stated regarding violence on both sides and him not condoning it regarding racist bigotry, and show you the other side of the story as I try to do here at NoSpinNewsSource.com. Now, ultimately, we have a lot to discuss today, and I'm going to try to make this more of a shorter show all around. But ultimately, Washington State refuses to reinstate high school coach after being fired for simply saying a prayer at the football game. That's right. That's pretty bad. Someone loses a job for saying a prayer. You know, it's kind of interesting times because, you know, we hear a lot of people wanting to take out what would be the 10 Commandments and crosses out of schools and courtrooms and places as such. But, yeah, ultimately our nation is going further and further away from God. And guess what? I don't mean to sound like a spokesperson for the Lord here, because I'm not. I'm not a preacher. But I will say this. As we get further from the Lord's blessings and protections get further from us. And let's be honest, people. Let's be real here. You know, I try not to talk too much about so-called gay rights or abortion, but I'm starting to have to take more of a stand now. And what I mean by that is this. The Lord doesn't want us to kill our kids. And no, it's not a woman's right to have an abortion. I don't care what you think or say, Western Washington. It's not your right. That's right. Women that are watching this show, you do not have a right to get an abortion. You do not have a right to kill your kid. So, women have rights, but let's don't confuse abortion with women's rights, and let's don't try to water it down with a term like that. You know, because when someone says, well, don't you support women's rights? Well, of course, a candidate has to support women's rights if you want to get elected, or if you are a human being or a decent guy at all, or whatever. But there's a difference between abortion and women's rights, so let's just call it for what it is. So, I have friends, as I mentioned before, LBGTQ and whatnot, but let's be real as well. What does it say in the Lord? What does it say in the Bible? Marriage is between a woman and a man. It's not supposed to be between two men, or a dog and a man, or something like that. And honestly, you may think that's funny, me making a comment of bestiality, but trust me, with the confusion where it's going, it actually is going further. Doesn't mean if you're dating another man, you'll be dating a dog or a kangaroo next month. I'm not saying that. But I'm going to do what I can do to tell the truth and I'm going to be showing a little bit more of my spirituality as well. I'm going to have to. Because the way I look at it, if I can't take up and defend what would be the Lord, how can I expect him to defend or look after me too? So some of these things are uncomfortable for us, but heck, if I can't get elected doing this the right way, the honest way, not committing sin and whatever, I mean, if I have to be a phony to get elected, then I'm not going to get elected, and I'm not going to be a phony, long story short. So I'm here today as a candidate as well as a news guy. But moving onward with the show. Former President Obama and Hillary Clinton are eclipsing back onto the scene to influence the 2018 midterm U.S. elections. Democratic and Liberal Party platforms. Just like cockroaches, if you leave one in your home, they make a return to take over the whole place once again eventually. And here they return. Just when many thought or wanted to believe, including many liberals on the left side of the spectrum and Democrats, they wanted to believe the nightmare was over. Well, surprise, they're back onto the scene. So, and they're going to be much more influential, just as influential as they've ever been in the past. So here we go. See, that's the thing. You have to learn when to say when. It don't matter if you're a conservative Republican or liberal Democrat or something else, or a libertarian, fringe, independent, anything else out there. You have to know when to say when. And sometimes your own friends, you think they're your friends or this or that, but they're actually killing you with their policies. So you have to know when to say, I've been friends with this congressman for the last 10 years. But we have to let him go now. That's just how it is. Now, before we move on with the show, I'm going to show you another video here of what will be Don Lemonhead of CNN himself. He has a meltdown after a President Trump speech in Phoenix. And we'll check you right back after this break.
It's Don Lemonhead, best known for getting drunk and babbling about how he wants a boyfriend during CNN's live New Year's Eve coverage last year, came completely unhinged last night after President Trump's speech in Phoenix, where he absolutely devastated the fake news industrial complex. While there was a teleprompter there, it sounded like President Trump decided to go completely off script and didn't even use it for 2 seconds. And it was awesome, wasn't it, Mr. Lemonhead?
His speech was without thought. It was without reason. It was devoid of facts. It was devoid of wisdom. There was no gravitas. There was no sanity there. He was like a child blaming a sibling on something else.
Oh.
He did it. I didn't do it.
Yes. Tell us
He
more.
certainly opened up the race wound from Charlottesville. A man clearly wounded by the rational people who are abandoning him in droves, meaning those business people.
Wait a minute, speaking of someone who's wounded, it looks like you're about to break down into tears, just like your coworker Van Jones did last week.
I usually have something clever, something smart. I'm just hurt. I'm sitting here hurt. And I think a lot of people are hurt tonight.
Please share some more of your divine wisdom with us, Mr. All-Knowing CNN host. Don.
That's the truth. If you watch that speech as an American, you had to be thinking,
You had to be thinking, that was one of the greatest speeches of all time.
And tonight, this entire arena stands united in forceful condemnation of the thugs who perpetrate hatred and violence.
Amen.
That sounds like racist code words to me. That's a racist dog whistle to the KKK. That's our sound on CNN.
But the very dishonest media, those people right up there with all the cameras.
What's that I hear? CNN sucks and others are chanting. Okay, let's check back in with CNN. We know how Don Lemon feels about this, but let's see what one of his panelists has to say.
Well, I thought that was a president totally unhinged. There's little doubt about that for anyone watching. I do think you get at a point. This is This is the evidence that backs up Bob Corker questioning his stability for office. This is the evidence as to why Susan Collins, another Republican senator, isn't so sure he may be around to run for re-election in 2020. This is evidence.
Whoa, slow down there, buddy. Talk about getting unhinged. I don't think that your heart can handle this kind of stress. Just settle down. Since CNN's the most trusted name in news, it always provides both sides of the story. Let's check in with a different panelist to get a different perspective.
This was a Castro-esque speech in length. It was an astounding chain of lies tied together by lunatic asides by a man who obviously is mentally unstable. I mean, I'm not joking about it or being a smartass. This is a man who is not well. This is a man who is not qualified or mentally or morally fit to be the president of the United States, and tonight was one more proof of it.
Okay then, well, let's go back to Don Lemon and see if he's finally calmed down yet, and maybe he can provide us with some rational analysis.
He is clearly trying to ignite a civil war in this country. He has not tamped down race. And I'm just going to say, I mean, if he was on my team in this newsroom and said those things, he would be escorted out of the building by security. And
Security! Donald Trump's calling us fake news! Let's check in with MSNBC and see if things are going any better over there.
He is telling his audience that the media lies about him. The president just quoted his remarks on Saturday after Charlottesville, and he falsely quoted his remarks. He said on that Saturday, we condemn in the strongest, most possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. He repeated that twice. He did not include that just now in his quoting of himself to this audience. He is lying to this audience.
Wait a minute, Lawrence. He said both sides were causing problems in Charlottesville, and you got upset about that, and now you're getting upset because he didn't say that both sides are causing problems? I'm just not following you. I'm sorry. Well, Don, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with today?
history is watching right now.
Yes.
History will bear witness to this.
To your fake
Do you
news.
pretend that what's in front of your eyes is not happening?
No, we're
Do
exposing
you
it every
enable
day.
someone like you enable an addict by pretending it's not happening?
Do we enable a fake news network by still watching it? I certainly hope not. I'm Mark Dice. Thanks so much.
Hello and welcome back to the Monthly Report Show. Kari Ilonummi here, continuing onward, and thank you for sticking with us. Ultimately, I apologize I don't have it here. I'm not sure what happened. I wanted to read you what would be a letter response to Congressman Rick Larsen of the 2nd District of Washington State, what would be my opponent last year in 2016 for United States House of Representatives when I ran for Congress, many of you are aware of. Ultimately, Rick Larsen, they call him Slick Rick. I don't really think he's too impressive myself, but some people think he's pretty slick. That he kind of walks a little bit on both sides of the line to try to keep everybody happy, because 2/3 of the folks in this district that we live in are liberal, Democrat leaning, but the other third approximately are what would be GOP, Republican, conservative. So he plays it more to the left, of course, but since that's 2/3 of the bread and butter, but ultimately, so we're seeing step by step Rick Larsen. That's right, Congressman Rick Larsen himself is starting to, and I apologize once again, I'd like to read you the exact remarks, and I'll have to make sure that I come back for the next monthly report show and have that and whatnot available, because I can't accuse somebody of something if I can't prove it and whatnot. And I believe it's only fair to provide that ample evidence. Unlike those folks that made up stuff about a dog, they just made it up. Well, I like to be honest and tell the truth, and I don't put down my opponents or folks just so I can take their position and nice lucrative career and whatnot in the Congress. I want to do this the right way and be a good, honest man in the process. So Representative Rick Larsen, I'm afraid I have to paraphrase and just let you know what he stated overall. He is starting to go with what would be Senator Maria Cantwell and others here in Washington State and others across the liberal left spectrum of Congress members and folks that are going and stating that our president is racist, bigoted, and this is and that. It's trying to make it appear as if his remarks after Charlottesville tragedy were very bigoted. Well, Rick Larsen is treading along on a very thin line, but what this shows me is he's going along with the rest of the leadership, and he's beginning to lose, just like how Hillary Clinton lost last year to Donald Trump. None of us ever saw that one coming, not even me. So if I didn't see it, I know 99% of you didn't see it. No offense. So I'm Previan in the know. So most aren't. Most have to see the car crash into you before you know it's going to hit when it comes to the economy or any other thing. No offense. But that's just how it is. So with that being stated, ultimately, I can tell my opponent is already beginning to lose. Does this mean he won't be reelected in 2018? I'm not saying that. I think he has one more reelection left in him. I do. I think 2018, Congressman Rick Larsen will win once again. I think it'll be his last time, though. I don't think that the Democrats and the liberals and the folks, period, are going to have enough. They're not going to be able to come up with something to even help Rick Larsen, ultimately. And when he sinks a little more, and many of the liberal left realize he's killing you. Actually, I think a lot of you folks around Western Washington already know that. His policies are not really democratic, and they are not good for your household. But some of you have other issues with other candidates out there, too, so you're just not really happy. But anyway, it's a start. That's the beginning of you having to purge him, if you like it or not. So I'm optimistic and excited about that one. But nonetheless, I'm absolutely disappointed and disgusted by Congressman Rick Larsen, because for him to go to such a low, sounding like Hillary Clinton, and that's exactly what he's doing. And this is a thing, too. Don't take me as a 100% conservative here. Honestly, I don't consider myself any more of a conservative as I do a liberal. I'm just a human being. I consider myself pretty modest, kind of down the middle. I'm not doing that strategically so I can play the system and get elected. This is who and what I am. I try to give accountability and credibility where it's due. I try to, give the compliments and credibility, like I said, where it's due, whoever's guilty or whoever's innocent at the time. So, when I don't like something the president does, I'll critique him and criticize him. When he does something good, I'll be the first to give him a pat on the back. That's fair. I don't allow my personal bias to get in the way. And that's one unfortunate thing around here in the area that I live in. I live in Western Washington and whatnot, and I have a lot of friends and people who know me, and even people that really appreciate my politics. But there are individuals that have an issue and resent me as well. And there are people that will acknowledge, including liberal left Democrats, people that are, I won't say too much, just leave it as that, without going into specific names around here, that will let me know that they're not very satisfied with Rick Larsen and they don't like him, but they let me know between the lines that they have an issue with me too. Well, you got to choose a side of the line eventually, people. You got to choose a side. So, anyways, Intel Defense Director James Clapper, who committed perjury for getting caught lying under oath regarding NSA metadata, says that President Trump is, quote, unfit, unquote, to serve as president. So the guy that lied under oath to the Congress is telling you that the president himself is unfit. You know, this guy that's talking, James Crapper, more like it, is garbage as far as I'm concerned. And he is knowingly and wittingly working with and for as a mouthpiece and face poster boy, whatnot, for what would be the deep state, just like John Brennan and others. But you know what's funny to me? Every step along the line, even when you have people in the White House leaking minutes later what the president just told them, even when you have people around the cabinet of the White House even stating that they don't even necessarily represent the president, they got their own thing and he has his, working against him. Even though the deep state and so many elements around the world are working against this president, he is still, step by step, it's a little slower than he may want, but step by step, he's actually pulling through and succeeding with this game plan. No matter what you throw at him. You could say he's a racist. You could say he's a bigot. You could say he's a homophobic. You could say he's a racist. You could say he's xenophobic. You could say anything you want to say. In bed with Russia. Russia collusion. Obstruction of justice. Oh, wait a minute. But speaking of that, obstruction of justice, Russia collusion, didn't I say that was going to start fizzling out too pretty soon? Didn't I say we wouldn't be hearing about as much about that pretty soon because it was all BS? And here we go today. We haven't heard hardly anything about so-called Russia collusion or the obstruction of justice. Those are two main things we've been hearing This president is not just unfit, he is a cheat, he's a hack, he's a thief, he's a liar. He stole, along with Mother Russia, his partner in crime, Vladimir Putin, his butt buddy. Supposedly, they stole the election together, and here they are today. Well, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Many of you, as I said before, are being played for fools. What I mean by that is this: Seattle and other places that have fell for this, God bless you, along with other places, LA, New York City, DC. These people are pimping and playing you for fools. Because if they can convince you that you're a victim, you've been stolen from, you're victimized, you've been cheated, you've been wronged, well, it makes it easier for you to get very callous and do bad things to your opponents and these people. I mean, honestly, if this man cheated you and stole from you and stole the White House and stole this and stole that from you, doesn't it make it easy for you to want to kill this president or to find it satisfying that someone else may? Right? Because you're the victim now. You're the victim. And Trump is the perpetrator. He's the criminal that put you in this situation. Isn't that what you want to believe? Well, we all need somebody to blame. It's easier than the guy in the mirror, isn't it? But let's be real, and let's be at least somewhat honest here, shall we? There's an old saying, we all make our own beds and lie in them. This situation didn't just happen overnight. This has been brewing and simmering for years in the making. 8 years of change you can believe in fizzled out. Don't try to pretend this president undid all the good things that Obama did. That's a crock. The day after the election, November's general election for the presidency, remember how I was down in Seattle enjoying my time, having fish and chips and being very social all over the city, just to see and feel and get a vibe from the city? To see what you thought of what would be those elections. Do you remember that show that I put out the following month for what would be December? Or maybe it was January afterward, but I discussed what would be these elections. I think it was January, and I talked about that I actually brought a little bit of delight to finally see the citizens of Seattle marching through the city, realizing there was a problem and acknowledging it. Well, it was the day after the election. All these people were, the economy's going to get so bad. Trump, They were ready to riot. They were ready to storm. They were ready to all kinds of stuff. They were crying. They were ready to shoot themselves in the head and commit suicide. They were ready to do all kinds of things and just give up and despair in life. Anyways, these poor folks. It was the day after the election. Well, if you were already that hopeless about life the day after the election, I'm going to tell you something. And you might not want to accept this, but subconsciously, you were telling off on yourself and by your actions. And what it shows is you weren't secure or happy with the last 8 years of Barack Obama as your president. Because if you were halfway safe, secure, and felt he brought you change we can believe in, guess what? You wouldn't have been so worried about Trump merely 12 hours after the general election. What it is, you knew after 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Bush before that. Many of you and your families know you can't afford to go without much longer, to lose your job, to have increased taxes, or have another element, hardship hit you and your families. Things aren't getting better, they're getting, or whatnot, they've been getting worse for years. Now we finally have a president that wants to make things better. He's fighting hard, he's trying hard, and many of you are working against him. Not all of you. Most of the citizens of the United States overall like this president or will at least be willing to support him based upon the elements that he discussed and whatnot in the general election and whatnot. That's why many of you, even liberal left Democrats, didn't want Hillary Clinton. You know you can't trust her, and many of you acknowledge that to me even. You didn't 2 years ago, but a lot of dirt came out in the last, especially in 2016. I remember many of you, January of 2016, were telling me you're voting for Hillary. By the time June came, July came, you didn't trust Hillary anymore, and you were talking about burning. How the world can change in 6 months. And the world is changing fast. And I have to admit, it's not all for the better, But I have to admit, it's not all for the worse either. Some of these things happening are forcing people like you to quit laughing at people like me as a conspiracy theorist goofball. Many of you folks aren't laughing now at all. Not just at me. You're not laughing at anything in life. Many of your marriages, relationships, friendships, communities, blocks in your neighborhood are breaking down. Many of you are turning into bullies, victims, victimizers, heroin addicts, junkies. Many of you are giving up. There's been this year, a major exponential increase in the amount of drug usage and overdoses. From last year even. A major whoosh. What's going on? It's called life is getting so hard for you to deal with, you can't deal with it. Well, you better start learning to deal with reality. And I have a good thing to say here, thank God. And one side of the spectrum that many are getting caught into the hardships, the drug usage and whatnot, I know some of you that actually went through some of these phases first. The beginnings of Obama, kind of before you had an excuse, or even the end of Bush. And it's funny as some of you that have had several years of the drugs, the despair, the problems of life, I'm seeing some of you folks, including old friends of mine that I had to kind of push myself away from because they were going down. I'm seeing many of you beginning to pull your heads out of a dark place and realize, oh my God, where has life taken me? Now that you've lost your children, now custody, now that you've lost 10 years of your health or life or whatever. And many people, I'll say this, I'm going to say this right now. This fits into the LGBTQ thing as well, the gay thing. You notice how all of a sudden how popular it was the last year or two of Obama? Everybody was wanting to be a man dating another man. It was just so trendy and popular. Well, I'm going to tell you something. This is also escapism. Many of you can't function in the real world. Many men can't even date a woman or know how to, or many women don't know how to make it work with a man. And so a woman wants to date another woman, or a man wants to date another man. It's not going to work. I'll let you know right now. If you can't make it work with the opposite sex, you're not going to be able to make it work with your new husband as you're a man, being the wife, so-called. It's not going to work. I don't care if you like that or not. Who am I to tell you what love is or what love isn't? Well, I'll tell you what marriage is and what marriage isn't. And I can also tell you and assure you, and I've even proven it right on this show, that even Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama stated years ago as candidates running for president that marriage was between a man and a woman as well. So you can't get mad at me or call me anything. Can't say I'm against LGBTQ or homophobic or this or that, when I'm just saying, hey, I'm friends with gays, but let's be honest, it's a sin. I have friends that have had abortion. I don't judge them. I love them. They're still my friends. They may still have abortions, and we'll still continue to have lunch together. But guess what? It's still a sin, right? And I'm not perfect either. I've committed a lot of sins, and I'm trying every day to make my life better and to be a better man and be closer to God too. So I'm not trying to give a huge sermon here, but I am not embarrassed to acknowledge I love Jesus Christ. I'm not embarrassed to admit that marriage is supposed to be between a man and a woman. And when it comes to being responsible, you got to be responsible. So, I mean, if someone was raped, I could see why you don't want to have the kid of who you were raped by. So there may be special exceptions where I would accept or be open to a so-called abortion and whatnot. But that may be my opinion, but I'm not sure even God himself would accept or agree or like that. So once again, who am I to decide what is right or wrong? But I need to present these things to you and tell you what I feel in my heart and soul. So before this seems like a Sunday sermon and whatnot, I want to keep this news related. So let's please take what would be a moment out to check out this next message. We're going to be showing what would be Sheriff Joe Arpaio, which was just pardoned by our president, and whatnot. We want to see his interview right now, and we will see you right after the break.
By the way, I'm just curious. Do the people in this room like Sheriff Joe? Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? That's what... He should have had a jury, but you know what? I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine, okay? But I won't do it tonight because I don't want to cause any controversy. Is that okay? All right? But Sheriff Joe can feel good.
That was President Trump last night at his rally in Arizona, hinting he may in fact pardon former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Joining us now to react, the man himself, the man the president was talking about, former Maricopa County Sheriff, Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Joe, what did you think of the president's comments?
Well, I was humble. It was great, but that's him. Everybody said he would never talk about it that night, but you know, I know him. My gut and my heart told me he would talk about it, and he did. So I have to thank him. I have to thank Fox, a great journalist that broke this story about 12 days ago.
Yeah, well, Greg Jarrett broke it, and I just think the president probably wanted to do it in his time and his way. Maybe there's a review going on. But at the end of the day, you enforce laws that are on the books. Did you not? And were you not ordered not to enforce the law of the land?
No, I was enforcing the law. This goes back to the former president, Eric Holder. 60 days after they took office, they launched this investigation. And here it is. When I was running for office, contempt of court, misdemeanor, and they did it politically. So after this is over, Sean, at the appropriate time, I'm going to go public and talk about the abuse of the political and justice system. People have to know the true story. If they can go after me, they can go after anyone in this country. So I will go public and try to let the people know.
Sheriff, explain specifically what happened in the case. You didn't have a jury of your peers. You didn't have... Explain the court side of this.
Well, I don't want to get too much into legal, but doing a civil case, the judge, and I'm not going to go into all his bias, believe me, but it will come out again. It's been public. Nobody will print it. But he pushed this over to another judge for contempt of court. And they charged me with the wrong charge, no jury. I can go on and on. So once again, the truth will come out, and I'm still concerned about the people of this country. If they can do this to me, after 55 years in law enforcement, 2 parking tickets in my life, and I have to sit in the defense table over this contempt of court, so we'll see what happens.
And Hillary goes free, and the unmaskers go free, and those that leak intelligence go free, and a Uranium One deal goes free, and you never hear about Ukrainian interference in the election. We do have a dual justice system, sadly. We don't have equal justice under the law. Sheriff, I was glad to hear the president's remarks last night. Certainly, it's reassuring. Thank you for being with us. We always wish you the best of luck. Thanks for being with us.
President, thank you so much. President Niinistö, I have a question for you as well, but if I could start with President Trump. In the middle of Hurricane Harvey hitting on Friday night, you chose to pardon former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. I wonder if you could tell us what was behind your thinking for issuing a pardon for the sheriff, and as well, what do you say to your critics, even some in your own party, who say it was the wrong thing to do?
Well, a lot of people think it was the right thing to do, John. And actually, in the middle of a hurricane, even though it was a Friday evening, I assumed the ratings would be far higher than they would be normally. You know, the hurricane was just starting. And I put it out that I had pardoned, as we say, Sheriff Joe. He's done a great job for the people of Arizona. He's very strong on borders, very strong on illegal immigration. He is loved in Arizona. I thought he was treated unbelievably unfairly when they came down with their big decision to go get him right before the election voting started, as you know. And he lost in a fairly close election. He would have won the election, but they just hammered him just before the election. I thought that was a very, very unfair thing to do. When I mentioned him the other night, you saw the massive crowd we had. The people went crazy when I said, what do you think of Sheriff Joe, or something to that effect. The place went absolutely crazy when I was in Arizona last week. And as far as pardons are concerned, I actually did this just before the meeting because I assumed that somebody would ask me the question. I didn't know it would be you, as you can attest. You didn't even know you were going to be called. But I thought I would. And, you know, Sheriff Joe is a great veteran of the military, great law enforcement person, somebody that's won many, many elections in the state of Arizona. But I at some of the other people that were pardoned over the years. And if you look at, as an example, President Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, who was charged with crimes going back decades, including illegally buying oil from Iran while it held 53 American hostages, wasn't allowed to do that, selling to the enemies of the United States. He was pardoned after his wife donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Clintons. Then you have dangerous criminals. President Clinton pardoned Susan Rosenberg, a member of the weathered underground, charged as part of a bank robbery that led to a guard and 2 police officers being killed. Drug dealers. President Clinton commuted the sentence of Carlos Vignali, a central player in a cocaine ring that stretched from California to Minnesota. Criminal leaker. You've heard the word leaker? President Obama commuted the sentence of Chelsea Manning, who leaked countless sensitive and classified documents to WikiLeaks, perhaps and others. But horrible, horrible thing that he did, commuted the sentence, and perhaps pardoned. President Obama commuted the sentence of Oscar Lopez Rivera, who was charged as part of a violent independence group from Puerto Rico responsible for 28 Chicago area bombings and many deaths in the 1970s and 1980s. Sheriff Joe is a patriot. Sheriff Joe loves our country. Sheriff Joe protected our borders. And Sheriff Joe was very unfairly treated by the Obama administration, especially right before an election that he would have won. So, and he was elected many times. So I stand by my pardon of Sheriff Joe, and I think the people of Arizona who really know him best would agree with me. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the Monthly Report Show. Kari Ilonummi here. Moving on. That Missouri State Senator Chappelle calling in support for our President Trump to be assassinated on her Twitter. This is disgusting. I try not to show too much, give too much show time toward these threats, death threats, or toward horrible things. As such, she was forced to retract her message and then give a phony apology about it, saying that she regretted it. And then at the very end of that message, just before she walks off the stage, where she says she regrets saying what she did, she says, "Only God can judge me," which is her way of letting you know she really don't regret it. She's just giving in under pressure and making it look good and whatnot. So she's a phony. And the funny thing is, she's so phony, she goes with everybody that touts these death threats, and she's so damn phony on the other side when she gets some pressure on her, just like Kathy Griffin. "Oh, I'm sorry. He broke me. You people are just little flakes. It don't matter who it is. If it's them or us, we can break you like a twig. Trust me. That's the reason why I feel actually more hope and faith and confidence with the city of Arlington now. If they can give in and be so weak to give in to Blaze the Dog, oh boy. Well, I got surprise and news for them, and I know how to work them in the future too. It's called lots of pressure, and they'll snap under it. So now I know that. It's kind of funny. But anyway, so female college students at Howard University were forced to leave cafeteria for wearing Donald Trump hats. Yeah, they were kicked out. That's offensive. We don't like that here. It's a college. There's free speech at colleges. And, you know, if your safe space is violated because of my red hat or someone else's, well, all I can say is you're psychologically ill, and good luck in the real world, kids. Because you're going to have to deal with, work with, interact with, bump shoulders with, have a cubicle next to, have a business partner, neighbor in the community that doesn't exactly like or think or dress the way you do. You like it or not, that's just how it is. My neighbor doesn't like me very well. One of them don't. He's jealous. He's insecure. He's an old man over 50, midlife crises, and hasn't worked in the last few years. He used to laugh at my politics. Now he don't. He just pops outside and tries to be annoying or whatever. But the funny thing is, and I'm sure you'll be watching this, sweet neighbor, the more you do this, the more people like you show me. The more you pick on me, from Blaze the dog people to whoever, like I said, the neighbor, the more you're showing me that I'm getting your attention, the more you're thinking about me at night, the more you know I've been right, and the more encouragement that gives a guy like me to keep on going. So, we all know about what's been happening in Houston, Texas lately. I cannot say enough to give what would be the element there that it deserves of compassion. All I can say is God bless everybody that's in Texas with this situation, those that are involved directly with this flood and the situation, and those that have friends and family there. I have a friend there, as far as I know, which is Keisha and her wonderful husband. As far as I know, everything is good and safe and sound for them, and we want to continue that way and for them to be safe and sound and whatnot, along with all of our friends and associates down there in the Houston, Texas area and whatnot. So I don't have any personal family members down there by blood, but Keisha and whatnot, you're pretty much like family. So and whatnot. So our hearts and prayers do go out for you folks down there, and I'm hoping that through this tragedy and situation, since we've been so divided as a nation, and honestly, there's been a lot of steam, a lot of anger. I mean, honestly, I was reading the paper here, and I saw in July that they have to actually, at a nearby lake, they actually have to deploy now a guard out there, a guard or two, to keep adults being nice. That's right, because too many people's been picking on each other and causing issues for the other people that are there at the beach. That's sad. When it's middle school children, high schoolers, you expect them to have a chaperone. When it's adults, it's time to be adult-like. So I'm hoping that through the circumstances, through hardships, the economy, and certain circumstances, that we decide not to turn on each other as a nation. Don't turn on ourselves. Don't turn on your family, like many people I know have done. Don't turn on yourselves. Don't put a heroin needle into your arm. Don't pop some pills tonight or kill yourself. I mean, think about it. I live here just north of Seattle, 40 miles north of Seattle. I spend a good chunk of my time in Seattle. I'm there at least 3 days a month on average. You know, I go to concerts, I have friends there and things I do there, social events and things, political and just fun, social and otherwise. And, you know, things are beginning to take a toll and heat up. So I'm asking you, you don't have to like this president. I didn't vote for him either. But we got to come together. You told me to give him a chance when it was Obama. Just give him a chance, Kari. Give him a chance. That's what you kept telling me for 4 years at least straight. Well, I'm telling you now. After 16 years of Bush and Obama, and you know how that worked out, honestly. You don't want to riot and kill for nothing. You're mad. Many of you don't have much value in your own life, so you're ready to kill yourself. Some of you are. Not everybody. Most people in the United States are not ready to kill, thank God. Most of you are actually very decent, sensible folks that just want to work, do your thing, have the government stay out of your business, leave you alone, and be happy and healthy, raise your family, and do your thing. Most of you just want to do your thing, and I know that. I don't think all of you are out there, you know, threatening the president, putting a needle in your arm, or doing the worst. Whatever. I don't think that at all. And sometimes I have to focus and study and research and whatnot on some of the most negative aspects of reality, and we have to talk about that here on the show. But I know most of you want a better future, a happy life, a quality life, and you deserve it. We just have to come together and make that happen. We have to see past our differences, and we do have to come together. And I just want to remind people, including my dear liberal Democrat friends of what would be Washington State and around the nation. I said a lot of things about Obama over the years, negative things. But I stated, and you can go back to past shows, that I do not want, quote, one single hair on Obama's head to be hurt, unquote. Because we're not killers, we're not murderers, we don't supposed to be that way. We don't want to be that way. That's savage, that's sin, that's evil, and that's not who we are as American citizens. That's not who we are meant to be, I assure you. So I never did threaten to kill Obama. I never said I wanted him dead. I never said I wanted anybody to hurt him. Even when people would question me or this or that, so I said, no, I don't want nobody hurting him. I want him to go to prison. I want him to be held accountable. I want him to get what he deserves. But he's a human. He deserves to be treated as a human. We're not murderers. We don't do that. And once we act in a such manner or fashion, we make ourselves below whoever that we're going against. I mean, honestly, people like that are a liar, a cheat, and a hustler. Do we want to be a murderer, which is even worse? So we don't want to be that way. So today I'm providing some words of wisdom in this hot room, and I hope that many of you are beginning, and I do believe you're beginning to wake up now. I think that's where a lot of this tension and anger and stuff is coming from. It's kind of like a bear coming out of hibernation. You finally realized you're awake, finally. You're hungry, and there's a lot of realization coming into play. You're grumpy. Well, hopefully that's a good first start to coming together and seeing the bigger picture. So I will be running for office, as many of you know, in 2018, but I won't be announcing that officially in what capacity and position until it is final. So January of 2018, expect an interesting and exciting show with what would be paperwork already filed for the position of Congress that I'll be running for. So God bless each and every one of you. I thank you. It's been a long, hard struggle over the years, but I'm going to stick with you. If your families and each and every one of you can go through and endure the pain and suffering of working 2 or 3 jobs, some of you dead-end jobs, barely making ends meet and getting through and struggling, like I said, well, if you can do that every single day and struggle and survive and be decent people, guess what? I can too, and I'm going to as well. Who do I represent? I represent everybody. I represent the working man. I represent the guy that's trying to look after his family, look after his community, move forward, increase, be prosperous, and have a peaceful, decent existence. We all can get along, folks, honestly. There's lots of companies and households and neighborhoods and buildings where there are blacks and Hispanics and natives and whites all living and interacting and working together, including right here in the Pacific Northwest. And racism is not a big issue. Don't make it an issue. Our president is not making it an issue. The mainstream media is turning this into an issue. Don't fall for the trap. We can pull through this. Let's just all admit that we've all made some mistakes. We all can pull ourselves through. We can all do better. And instead of judging one another and just pointing the finger, let's see how we can get along with other people. Let's see how we can find a way to break bread and come together. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'll be breaking bread with somebody, including a family member that we haven't seen in a long time. Somebody who we haven't sat down with in about 5 years. It's going to be a little awkward and uncomfortable. I'm going to admit it. But sometimes you got to be the bigger person, and that's what I'm trying to be. And this person definitely victimized and did our family, the rest of us, very dirty. This person I'm talking about screwed herself over, abandoned her own son, not just the rest of us in this family, and made deep, deep mistakes that she's going to regret for the rest of her life as her boy is turning 18 in several months from now. This is somebody who's rejected my politics and me and all of a sudden wants to sit down and have lunch with me tomorrow. How the world can come around and things can change. Never say never. So, I'm willing to work with anybody that's willing to work with me. But I will say this, regarding that personal family member, I'm not going to make this easy for you. This isn't going to be an easy or a free ride. You're going to earn your way back into this family. We'll give you an opportunity and chance, but trust me, you've got a lot of work to do after decades of what you just did. You know who you are, family member. God bless you, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for sticking with me in the NoSpinNewsSource.com monthly show. Please tell your friends and family. We want more ratings here. We want to boost this up. And I do expect, speaking of which, I expect by next summer my website and popularity, along with approval rating, will be exponentially increased, because I'm kind of at one of those make or break moments and whatnot, and the career of mine is beginning to pull through, and my opponents are starting to kind of get out of my way in different ways. So let's all move up together, just like the Jeffersons. Let's do good. Let's take care of each other. Let's don't break down. Let's don't hurt each other. Let's don't hurt ourselves. We're all in this mess together. So your neighbors doing good is good for you. It keeps you and your household safe. Just like when my neighbor used to have a job and used to do good, used to work 10 hours a day, he didn't like my politics, but he thought it was goofy and he didn't have any energy to even pay attention to me. Now he hasn't worked for 3 years. He has too much time and energy to pay attention to me. You get what I'm saying here? Okay, thank you. God bless you all. See you soon. Au revoir.
The more I see CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that. Because it's ratings. Because ratings. Our ratings are incredible right now. But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit.
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. I just feel like they don't really have it, but they want to keep digging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you are witch hunting me. Like, you have no smoking gun, you have no real proof.
And the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia. The more I see CNN constantly like, Russia this, Russia that. Because it's ratings. But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit.
It's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any...
There's no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. In part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time.
Well, Democrats continuing their personal attacks on President Trump this weekend, calling into question his knowledge of the civil rights movement. Watch.
I think the person we have in Washington today is uncaring, know very, very little about the struggle and the history of the civil rights movement.
Well, here to weigh in, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Fox News contributor Dr. Alveda King. Dr. King, great to see you this morning. Just on the face, listening to what he had to say. David Axelrod the other day in an interview with Representative had this to say and pushed back on this whole George Wallace comparison. I want to play this and get your take on it.
What about the president and his actions suggest to you that he is in that tradition, the tradition of a famed, notorious segregationist?
Well, I think this president right now is asking for the records, the voter registration records of people all over America. That is a form of intimidation. That's a form of harassment.
Dr. King, your thoughts?
Well, first I'd like to say that the president, of course, is leading the charge for civil rights today for the little unborn persons in the womb who have a right to live. I'm director of civil rights for the unborn, and I say that everybody's civil rights count, from the womb to the tomb, the young, the old, the sick, the elderly, the babies in the womb, and everything. And so the president is certainly fighting for civil rights today, and he has surrounded himself with African-American leaders and everyone that is supporting. We don't have to defend the president. I believe President Trump might agree that we are defending America. He's leading the charge and we're supporting him. Now, at the African American Museum, for example, he was knowledgeable of much of the history of African Americans, and when we stopped and we looked at some of the displays, the little slave manacles and things, he said, this is terrible. You can't do that to people. And so President Trump is surrounding himself with knowledgeable people. President Trump himself is a very brilliant man. I believe he's compassionate. If you go and look at all of the executive orders, the things for women in science, for African American education, for moving.
There's no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. in part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. This is the NoSpinNewsSource.com monthly report for August 2017, a very special edition. And I am your host today, Kari Ilonummi. And thank you once again for joining us. Now, we'll be discussing a whole lot of hot topic items. That's for sure. Some of these items is going to be very difficult for many of you to believe, but that's pretty commonality with many of the things I've said over the years, and unlike most folks in politics, I'm still here shining bright. So, here we go today. Now, starting out the show, as you notice, what better people to have than the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, and with what would be Obama, former president himself, stating that there is no such things as what would be those fraudulent election results or the ability for another nation or whatnot entity to hack or steal the elections. So it's funny because you got to see the one side of Obama and then you got to see him say something else entirely different. There is the proof. Not much more to say. So before we continue though, why don't we check out what would be this next video of what would be Prosecutor Larry Klayman discusses the Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's investigation witch hunt into President Donald Trump. And we'll catch you right back after this break.
The president tweeted on Friday after I got fired that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night because it didn't dawn on me originally that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
I thought Comey really made a fool out of himself today. I mean, I think it's clear now that, there's on a few facts. Number one, the president was not under investigation.
Right, absolutely.
Without question. Number two, I mean, he was eager to see if any of his cohorts, or we should call them satellites, were, and he asked to be notified of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this whole Russian thing is just basically a bunch of BS.
Well, very interesting to remember what transpired last Thursday. The testimony of former FBI director, fired FBI director Jim Comey, admitting to going to a friend to have a story leaked with the hopes that it would bring about the appointment of an independent counsel. And then former FBI assistant director James Kallstrom appearing on the Fox Business Network with not too many kind things to say about former Director Comey. Now, to put this all in perspective for us and take a look ahead to the testimony we'll hear this afternoon in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, we welcome in a gentleman known for fighting for individual liberty and freedom, the founder of Judicial Watch and now at Freedom Watch, so famous, or perhaps in the mindset of the left. Remember their televised fantasy on NBC for so many years, The West Wing? I understand a character was created in the image of our next guest. From Newsmax Washington, we welcome in Larry Klayman of Freedom Watch. Larry, it's so good to have you with us again. And I just got to ask you, you were in the room for the testimony last week from Comey. What were your impressions of that entire episode?
Well, it was a charade. It was a dog and pony show. First of all, the Republican establishment, I admire you too, JD, because you've always fought against that establishment. You're your own man when you were congressman and now. But that Republican establishment, run by Chairman Richard Burr of that committee, basically rolled over to the minority. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the minority ranking member, and he allowed in the opening statement to trash the President of the United States and to accuse him of all kinds of illegalities. So you can see where it was going. And they brought Comey forward, dog and pony show, to try to destroy the president, because the reality here is, in my view, is that the Republican establishment wants to get rid of Trump, and they probably would like to get rid of Pence in the process too, the vice president, so they can run their establishment candidate in 2020. And then you have, on the left, you've got these Democrats who have lost all sense of honesty or truth, and Comey assisted them. But with regard to the clip and regard to these documents, nobody's asked the question whether they're true or not. They just accepted it as true, both sides, Republicans and Democrats on that committee. And they didn't get behind it. Why didn't they ask, when did you create these documents? Do you have a laptop? Would you please turn over your laptop so we can take a look at how you actually created them? Because I believe they were made as a justification in revenge for Comey's firing. And if you looked at him at that hearing, he literally was almost foaming at the mouth with hatred for the president because he's an establishment creature in Washington. He doesn't like to be embarrassed. He doesn't like to lose his job. And he should have lost his job. And let me tell you something else, JD, quickly, is that we filed a lawsuit against Comey shortly before that hearing. I was seeking to serve him with that lawsuit, with a summons. I had a process server with me, and I asked politely to the head of security of the Senate Intel Committee if we could simply deliver it to him, because these people vanish. They try to evade service of process after the fact. And this lawsuit is by Dennis Montgomery, a whistleblower who came forward to Comey with 47 hard drives, over 600 million pages of information showing surveillance on President Trump when he was a businessman, surveillance on the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, other justices, 156 judges, yours truly, because I've been opposing these people for years. Anybody who challenged them were being subject to this illegal criminal surveillance. And Comey sat on this for over 2 years. We gave him all the documents. My client Montgomery got immunity. He buried it because now we find out with certain press reports in the last few weeks that the FBI was engaged in illegal surveillance along with the intelligence agencies. And I've tried to get these intelligence agencies to investigate it, to bring Montgomery in front. This should be the issue, the leaks, the surveillance. They don't want to do that because they've known about it in all likelihood, and they don't want to challenge these intelligence agencies, these committees on Capitol Hill, because stuff about their private lives, stuff about their professional lives will likely come out to destroy their lives and career. I call it the Anthony Weiner factor, is that there's some stuff lurking there that they don't want to expose. So they're not doing the bidding of the American people. They're doing their own political bidding. And that's the tragedy here.
Pardon me, I don't know, I must be allergic to hear about that kind of surveillance. Not to joke, but it's a serious matter, but it just prompted a sneeze from me. Today, more than a sneeze from the Attorney General of the United States, who will sit before that same Senate Intelligence Committee at 2:30 Eastern Time. Over on the Fox News Channel, Judge Andrew Napolitano yesterday was saying, wait a minute, Mr. Attorney General, you don't want to go testify. Here is the case made by Judge Napolitano. Let's listen to it, then we'll get you to evaluate it.
This is a very dangerous position for him to be in. He is not testifying as the chief law enforcement officer in the land, as the Attorney General. He's testifying as a witness because he doesn't run the Russia investigations, any of them. He is a witness. He has involvement in both. He's going to be accused of perjury. He's going to come to a conflict point where he has to decide, am I here to defend the President of the United States or here to defend myself? That's an awful position for him to be in.
So is that a suggestion that he should not testify?
If I were his lawyer, and presumably he has kept counsel with some lawyer, either in the DOJ or outside attorney, I would advise, do not put yourself in this position. It is a no-win situation.
Hey, Larry, I hear that, and granted, for purposes of full disclosure, I am not a lawyer, never played one on TV, but as a member of Congress, even though you put witnesses under oath, it is not a judicial proceeding. It is a political inquiry, and it seems to me that that General Sessions can come in and say, well, wait a minute, before we go anywhere else, I got to tell you about Jim Comey, who failed to report to me as a subordinate all these goings on. In other words, it seems to me, understanding the congressional process, that former Senator Sessions, now the Attorney General, can use this hearing to, in essence, clear his name and that of the President. Am I misinterpreting something here?
No, I agree with you, JD. I do. Technically speaking, Judge Napolitano is right, but that's not the way it works on Capitol Hill. They don't hold anybody account for perjury. Eric Holder, I was on an airplane yesterday, I saw Holder. We traded some
some barbs with each other in a good-natured way. I mean, here's a guy who lied in front of Congress, never was held accountable. You've got James Clapper, the director of national intelligence, who lied about mass surveillance. He said it wasn't happening, not held accountable. The Democrats are going to accuse you of lying in any event. And I admire Sessions for doing this because he has to do it. And he's a fine man. I met him as a young lawyer in Mobile, Alabama when he was U.S. Attorney. I've encountered him throughout my career. He's a man of great integrity. I honestly believe that, and I don't say that about everybody. So he'll handle himself up there. He knows what to do. He's a good lawyer. And he's got to get out there, and he's got to clear the air, and I don't believe that he will lie under oath. And if they want to make that point, I'll frankly be there to defend him. Because, frankly, it's out of control. These Democrats want to destroy the presidency. They want to bring down the country. You know, when was the last time a leftist was concerned about Russia? Okay, and that's what these people are. Russia's like their Mecca. It's the equivalent of their Mecca. I mean, Bernie Sanders honeymooned in Moscow. He could do a Hollywood movie, honeymoon in Moscow, and play the part. And so consequently, this is all a manipulation to bring down the presidency, and somebody's got to fearlessly come forward, and Sessions is doing that. He won't be found to have perjured himself, but he's doing the right thing, so I agree with you.
Well, let me come back to something else that is in the news this morning, and you lamented, as do I, the almost spinelessness of the Republican establishment on Capitol Hill and elsewhere there on the swamp. Now the bells have been ringing with an AP alert. Speaker Paul Ryan comes out saying this morning, quote, "Let Robert Mueller do his job." Now, for better or worse, the former FBI director, and apparently, if we're to believe what we hear, good pal of James Comey, is the independent counsel. And boy, all the establishment Republicans are falling into line. Newt Gingrich sounded a cautionary note over the weekend. And of course, there's this obligatory chorus of hosannas for Judge Mueller, whom I'd see him on the elevator when he'd be over on the Hill doing his business. He seemed to be a fairly good guy, but there are questions about this entire independent counsel. Your take both on the Ryan pronouncement this morning and, if you will, the real Robert Mueller.
Well, I'll give you the real Robert Mueller first, okay? The real Robert Mueller, FBI director, covered up an investigation of Saudi money laundering. I had two FBI special agents I represented, Robert Wright and John Vincent. One ultimately came to work for me at Judicial Watch. He ran the Chicago office at the time, John Vincent. Robert Wright tried to expose the fact that he was trying to investigate money laundering by someone named Marsouk leading up to 9/11. I met him before 9/11 in the office of David Shippers, the House impeachment manager, who I'd gotten to know during impeachment. And he told me this. And why was it covered up by the FBI, by the higher-ups? He wasn't allowed to do an investigation. He wasn't even allowed to bring forward information that a Muslim special agent of the FBI that they asked to be wired refused to be wired in this investigation because, quote, Muslims don't rat out other Muslims. And instead of following through with that investigation, they tried to take away the security clearance of Robert Wright to drive him out of the FBI. And who was the FBI director? Mueller. Let's also remember that Mueller was the guy who sat on a lot of this illegal surveillance when he was at the FBI. So since we've got issues of leaks and everything else, he's conflicted because he himself was involved in a cover-up of the illegal surveillance that was being conducted even during the Bush years, George W. Bush. Warrantless wiretaps. I brought a case on that. So Mueller's got a lot of problems here. He should not, and he's also a close friend of Comey. It was a mistake by the Deputy Attorney General to appoint him. I don't think that he thought it through at the time. I think Rosenstein's a good man. He didn't think it through. He panicked, and they appointed Robert Mueller. Now let's talk about the traitors on Capitol Hill. I mean, this is reminiscent of Caesar and Brutus. You've got Paul Ryan, who's been two-faced, not just during the campaign, but after that. He would like to see Trump gone. He's playing the game, but he's not an honest person, and he's not loyal to, frankly, the president. Now, you've got other people up there, and you know very well about him. You ran against him, John McCain, who, frankly, I think has lost his mind. I think at this point he should retire and go live in Scottsdale. It's a beautiful place. I love Arizona. But this man just recently said that President Obama was a better leader than President Trump. I mean, this is what you've got. The Republicans are trying to stab the president in the back, the establishment. They want to destroy him. And now you've got the Democrats trying to destroy him. So he's up against everything. And he's Caesar. These people like Ryan and McCain and others are Brutus. And we, at Freedom Watch, we want to see this president succeed. I'll criticize him when necessary. I have. But this is our last chance. If President Trump does not succeed, the next president is going to be 100 times worse than Obama. And that's a reality. So, and this country will not survive. We barely escaped Hillary Clinton. We can't see this happen. So those people out there, conservatives, libertarians, others, we have to be supportive of the president.
All right, Tom Fitton and Jay Secular. All right, Greg, I'll go back to you. So the deep state selective leaking comes out fast and furious. As Tom is mentioning, there's a slow drip on Hillary information and release from the FBI information. What did you make of the grand jury footnote?
Well, look, there's such a double standard here, and every time Hillary Clinton or Democrats do something wrong, the media sort of yawns and then proceeds to ignore it. But if Donald Trump so much as hiccups, they go apoplectic and crazy over it. And the Uranium One deal, as you pointed out in your monologue, is a perfect example of that. I mean, my goodness, it is a crime, a felony, to use your public office to confer a benefit on a foreign government in exchange for money. It's called fraud and bribery. It's an emoluments clause violation, public corruption. It's also arguably racketeering to use a business as a receptacle for illegal money. I mean, all of those are crimes. And, it's about time that the Justice Department now reopen the Hillary Clinton investigation, not just into her emails, but into a pay-to-play, as you described it in your monologue.
Tom, is there anything else you could share that you've gotten from the Freedom of Information Act request that Judicial Watch has made?
Well, we just had another batch of documents, to Greg's point, that came out earlier this week of Huma Abedin emails that show the Clinton Foundation was actually talking to the State Department about ambassadorships, trying to push donors' interests with the State Department. Again, Doug Bann of the Clinton Foundation through Huma Abedin. Another email shows that Huma Abedin sent classified information to herself on her Clinton email server account. So this is now, again, more information, more classified information mishandling, more pay-to-play information, more scandal related to the Clinton Foundation, the intersection with the Clinton State Department. All of this, to me, screams of the need for the president, as president, to tell his Justice Department to take a look at how the Clinton investigations were handled or mishandled and see if they need to be reinvigorated or restarted again, given all this new information and as this FBI mishandling of the investigations where they're giving everyone immunity, looking the other way when documents and records are destroyed, and make sure that was done on the up and up, and if necessary, restart it.
Hang on. Jay, I agree with Greg. We've got to reopen these cases. That's pay to play. That's bribery. This is obstruction of justice. This was to prevent congressional oversight with the mom and pop shop bathroom closet and the deletion of emails and this new information. What does it take to get an investigation into multiple serious felonies if your last name is in Trump or Hannity or Secular?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think you got a situation. You can look at it right now. I mean, I think this is the reality. I mean, we left off, of course, the famous tarmac discussion between the former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, and then the then current Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch. And that's all going on simultaneously when the secretary was about to be interviewed by the FBI. But here's the commonality. Who was the director of the FBI when all of this was going on? James Comey, who we now know is the leaker-in-chief in all of this. So James Comey is the commonality that was there in all of this. He's the leaker-in-chief, and he's the one who brags about that he leaked information that included conversations he had with the President of the United States to get what?
Absolutely.
A special counsel, which he got. And then ask yourself, how is that okay? And the answer is it's not.
Ukraine, Uranium One, this new information from the FBI tonight, of course, the ridiculous dossier. I want everybody under oath in investigations and stop the hyperventilating, the double standard, the breathless reporting, and ignoring real crimes. That's what I want.
And welcome back to the Monthly Report show for August 2017. Now let's get on to some discussion and whatnot here. Well, first of all, as many of you are well aware of, I met what would be Uli John Roth, the lead guitarist of the hit band The Scorpions, along with guitarist of Ozzy Osbourne, Zakk Wylde recently. I have photos here to show of that. I hope you enjoy those and whatnot. And ultimately, from there, the president has issued and created what would be a new special advisory commission on election integrity. This will help to safeguard the rule of law and democracy, in which states that it is illegal for non-U.S. citizens to vote in our elections, vote twice, or to fraudulently use dead voters' information to be placing new or what would be additional votes. Now, of course, many people who don't like this president are calling racist. He's racist, they say. Well, it's not racist. U.S. citizens should be voting in our elections, and people who are not citizens of this nation have no damn business voting in our elections. As an American, do you think you could go down to Guadalajara, Michoacan, Mexico City? Do you think you could go down there and vote? No, you can't. So why should they be able to vote here? Fair is fair. U.S. citizens are U.S. citizens. Mexican citizens are Mexican citizens. And if a Mexican wants to become a U.S. citizen, just like my biological father, well, guess what? He was an immigrant too. But he went through the legal methods and means. That's right. From Finland. And he did it legally to come to the United States. And contributed and was a tax-paying citizen. So, there's a legal way to immigrate, and there's nothing racist about that, because, heck, if I was racist against any of those other immigrants coming here, I'd have to be racist against my own biological father, now wouldn't I? But that's not the case, obviously. So we believe in the rule of law, and that is very fundamental and important. Now, 30 out of the 50 states, and this information is probably about 3 weeks old right now, there's most likely over 30, but what would be of the states have complied thus far with this request to give over what would be voter data. The other 20 states will eventually, like it or not, you're going to have to. I expect once this commission has finished its review as well, that the American people will discover that President Donald Trump won not just the electoral but the popular vote by and large of the citizens of the United States, and that's how he became president. So I'm expecting upwards of approximately literally 5 million votes to have been fraudulently casted toward literally the DNC and specifically Hillary Rodham Clinton. So if she's claiming what would be voter fraud, she could be right, but it's not. Just like collusion, she could be right, but it's not with Donald Trump. It's actually her own team. Now, this is very difficult for many of you to accept, to believe. It's going to take some time, and some of these videos on here are going to help to provide that ample evidence and proof for you. But with that being stated, sometimes people have to have their world crushed and break down around them in order to give up their falsely conceived notions and belief systems and things. For instance, you know, I see a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum. I see liberals that want me to be liberal and put down the conservatives. I see conservatives that expect me to be conservative and put down the liberals. Well, let's get something straight, folks. We've all contributed, both sides of the line, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, honestly. So we look at the last 16 years of George W. Bush and Barack Obama administrations, things have went to hell, economically speaking. They haven't got any better. And that's given the Republicans their fair share of the due credit, or should I say blame, as well as the Democrats. And that's the thing that burns many of you people, is I don't choose necessarily a side. I don't even, if it was, I ran for an independent Congress member last year because I didn't want to have to choose a party. Now next year, 18, me running for Senate and House of Representatives here in Washington State, I will be choosing a party. I'll be choosing a major political party, and there's only 2 to choose from. So we'll have to see where that goes. But anyways, but before we elaborate too much, I would like to show you John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's former head of her presidential campaign, on Fox News discussing what would be the collusion with Russia, pay to play, and a company called Uranium One. That's right, Uranium One. We'll see you right back after this break. Thank you.
This half an hour, the Russian election probe heating up in the House. Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, met with a House panel probing how Russia's interference in the 2016 election earlier this week occurred. One focus of the investigation, the hacking of Podesta's own personal email account and the release of his emails by WikiLeaks during the campaign. In recent days, President Trump has accused former President Obama of doing too little to address Russian cyber activity while he was still in the White House. Joining me right now is the former chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, John Podesta. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Maria.
So you met with the Senate Intelligence Panel as part of this investigation. What can you tell us? House Intelligence. What can you tell us about that meeting?
Well, they wanted to know essentially what had happened to me and what the effect of was on the campaign, the Russian interference in our democratic process, and they're probing what actually happened, whether there was collusion, and what are we going to do about it. They asked me not to get into specific questions that they asked me and my specific answers, but in general terms, they're taking a bipartisan look at this stage. You know, they had trouble in that committee when their chairman, Devin Nunes, was kind of working with the White House to try to build cover sort of for whatever had happened in the Trump White House and the Trump campaign, and particularly the Mike Flynn matter. But I think they're back on track with the bipartisan investigation, so there are members from both sides, and they asked probing questions about what had happened during the campaign.
Do you find it odd that there's been so much attention on the Trump campaign and the Trump associates and potential collusion with Russians when in fact it's really the Democrats who have deeper and stronger ties to Russia? I mean, John, I've got to ask you about your own situation, your ties to Russia entities. You joined the board of a small energy company in 2011. 2 months later, a Russia entity directly funded by the Kremlin invested $35 million in the company. You were given 75,000 shares in a Russian company, which you failed to disclose when you became an Obama associate.
Maria, that's not true. I fully disclosed and was completely compliant with, and by the way, I divested before I went into the White House.
But where did you divest it, John? A lot of people feel like you divested it to your adult children.
I divested it consistent with the advice that I was given by the White House counsel's office, and I was fully compliant and fully transparent about what I had done. And so the fact that you're picking through my emails that were stolen by the Russians and released by WikiLeaks, and creating a story which is not true, is something that we have to deal with. So you weren't given 75,000
shares of stock in a Russian company? You were not given 75,000 shares?
I didn't have any stock in any Russian company. So go back and get your facts straight, Maria.
That's not true, John. We know that you own 75,000 shares. You're on the board of Joe.
It's not a Russian company. They own less than 5%.
It's backed by the Kremlin.
I didn't own any shares in that company, Maria.
When you stepped off the board, you were given 75,000 shares from Joe Lee.
That is not true.
How many shares were you given, John?
Maria, I didn't have any shares in any Russian company. I was on the board of an American company that did business here and only here. The Russian company had a small investment in that company, and
well, it's widely reported that it's backed by the Kremlin. It's been widely reported that that company's been backed by the Kremlin, and they gave you 75,000 shares that you had to disclose
when you went
into the Obama administration.
Maria, you can keep leveling this charge. It is not true.
Okay.
They didn't give me anything. They had a small investment in a company I was on the board of. It was a clean energy company that was trying to deal with the issue of trying to produce energy, liquid fuel, from a biotechnology process. It was based in Boston. The Russian company had a very small investment in it, and you could keep saying that they gave me stock, but they didn't.
I'm just following all the widely reported information here, John. There's also Hillary Clinton, obviously.
Maybe you're looking at widely reported information from InfoWars.
No, I'm not.
But it is not true.
This is Politico. This is the New York Times. This is the Wall Street Journal.
No, it's
That's
not.
what I'm looking at.
Information from InfoWars.
No, I'm not.
And welcome back to the Monthly Report show. Now, John Podesta obviously denies that, and I'm sure people on the liberal left and many Democrats will want to believe this can't be the truth. Well, as I told Mr. Congressman Rick Larson, here of the great state of Washington, my former opponent of last year for U.S. House of Representatives, a 9-term Congress member, that's right. I don't know how he pulled that one off. But anyways, so like I told him recently, you folks had to push it. Make up stuff about Donald Trump and let it go. And now the rubber band is about to snap back with karma. So Hillary Clinton launches her what she calls Resistance PAC, Political Action Committee. Governor Gary Brown, California, blasted for advocating the overthrow of the United States. Voters think that Congress should investigate Loretta Lynch ties to what would be Hillary Clinton. The Clinton probe, excuse me. And U.S. fertility rate is at an all-time low. Very interesting. So at this point in the road, it's about time to discuss attorney links to what would be the Clinton Foundation, Mayo Clinic, and others. That's right. We have some bombshell information from an attorney down in what would be Florida discussing some of the situation regarding people ending up dead around the Clintons that are key witnesses. And some of them are dying and being murdered just before they go to trial. Interesting. It's got to be a coincidence. Have you ever heard about the book called The Clinton Body Count? Well, they're going to have to revise that and make an edition number 2 before probably 2017 is up. We'll catch you right back after this break. We're going to check you out with this video, and hope you enjoy it.
The DNC fraud lawsuit continues to be ignored by the mainstream media. Meanwhile, the Clinton body count continues to grow. Now, Jared Beck is representing the plaintiffs in the DNC fraud lawsuit. We spoke to him in the past. We are now joined by his wife, also an attorney in Miami, Florida, Elizabeth Lee Beck. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Elizabeth, I wanted to get you on for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to keep the DNC fraud lawsuit in the narrative, in the talk, especially here because there's been no coverage whatsoever on mainstream media, at least that I could see. No talk about even the Bernie Sanders lawsuit. Being on the other side of this, seeing the actual inner workings, seeing what Jared's doing behind the scenes, does it shock you to see that the mainstream media is completely ignoring this?
Yeah. Do you remember Mr. Brandon Wiseman?
I'm sorry, who is that?
Mr. Brandon Wiseman. He passed away very suddenly. And when he passed away, there was some speculation that he was quite possibly connected to the DNC lawsuit. And we were contacted by many members of the public who expressed concern. But I want to go through a timeline, some connections, if I may, Owen.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's Barrington Wisenant. He was a federal prosecutor in Florida. He wound up dead on the beach with head trauma. And now you're talking about possible connections there.
So it's very convoluted, so you have to follow very closely, okay? Okay, number one, there is a Barrington Wisenant, J. Plotkin, Jacksonville connection. So follow me here. J. Plotkin was the director of the state attorney's office in Jacksonville from 1993 to 2009. Until January of 2009, he supervised all aspects of an office of 100 attorneys and over 300 support staff. Mr. Brandon Wiseman is actually not a Miami native, even though he worked here, and passed away in Broward County, which is in South Florida. To the contrary, Mr. Brandon Wiseman is a native of Jacksonville, Florida. He graduated from Bishop Kenny High School in 1997 and worked as an assistant state attorney with the 4th Judicial Circuit from 2004 through 2007. In other words, Mr. Brandon Wiseman and Mr. J. Plotkin worked in the state attorney's office at the same time. That's
So
the wisest.
Where does Jay
Just let me
Plotkin
hear-
come into this? Because this is a new name to me.
Jay Plotkin?
Yes.
Just bear with me.
Okay.
Now, there's a Jacksonville Mayo Clinic connection. Mayo Clinic has a hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. There's a Mayo Clinic Judge Harvey Schlesinger connection. A lawsuit was filed in 2015 in federal court in Jacksonville against the Mayo Clinic in connection with an organ transplant case. The judge presiding over that case was the Honorable Harvey Schlesinger. There's a Judge Schlesinger, Jay Plotkin, Branton Wisenet connection. Jay Plotkin is Judge Harvey Schlesinger's son-in-law. Mr. Wisenet's body was recovered on May 24th, 2017. On June 8, 2017, Judge Schlesinger threw out the case against Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, on summary judgment. There is a Mayo Clinic Clinton Foundation connection. A number of hospitals, including Mayo Clinic and St. Vincent's, co-sponsored a launch event in Northeast Florida in connection with the Clinton Health Matters Initiative. There is a Mayo Clinic high government officials connection. The emeritus public trustees of the Mayo Clinic include a Thomas J. Brokaw, quite possibly Tom Brokaw, a Barbara P. Bush, a Richard B. Cheney, possibly Dick Cheney, Senator Thomas A. Daschle, and Paul A. Volcker. The Mayo Clinic provides a full range of health services, including organ transplants, bone marrow transplants, blood transfusions, and genetic medicine. There is a Clinton Foundation Haiti connection. There is a Klaus Eberwein Haiti connection. Klaus Eberwein, a former Haitian government official, was found dead July 11th of this year with a gunshot wound to the head. He was found at 14501 South Dixie Highway, a Quality Inn. This Quality Inn is 7.5 miles from my office. There's a Peter Smith Mayo Clinic connection. Mr. Peter Smith purportedly took his own life May 14th in a hospital in Rochester, Minnesota, near the Mayo Clinic, called the Aspen Suites. The Aspen Suites is across the street from the St. Mary's campus of Mayo Clinic and is almost exclusively used by patients of the hospital. He purportedly left a suicide note which stated that there was no foul play whatsoever and, quote, recent bad turn in health since January 2017, end quote, was the reason that he was taking his own life, and the timing was related to, quote, to life insurance of $5 million expiring, end quote. He was purportedly searching for Clinton emails. That's my research, sir.
Wow. Elizabeth, you go on.
I'm not aware of any life insurance policy that would pay out if the person committed suicide. I believe they usually have a suicide exclusion.
Yeah, that's pretty much commonplace in any insurance policy. Wow, Elizabeth, I'm not sure how often you do interviews like this. You did great research. You were reading from our notes. From your notes. Thank you so much for breaking that down. I don't even think you understand the bombshell that you just released here. I mean, this is actually huge news. I contacted Jared because I wanted to get an update on the DNC fraud suit, and I wanted to talk about, we talk about potential witnesses testifying against the Clintons. All of a sudden, Peter Smith, all of a sudden Klaus, all of a sudden these deaths, so I wanted to have him on, and then you were like, well, I've got some new breaking news here. I've made some connections. Wow. I'm just going to try to digest everything that you just said. It sounds to me...
Everything I said to you is a fact. Everything I said to you is fact. I have
clearly laid it out.
No speculation, just facts.
So the interesting thing to me then, and allow me to speculate, if you will, this is my speculation, why would, it seems to me the key here that I noticed was the organ transplant. An organ transplant. And that just makes me scratch my head. Why would there be a tie into an organ transplant? Is this stuff that goes on at the Mayo clinics down there?
They have an organ transplant department at Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, yes.
I mean, you can imagine where my mind goes. You start talking about organ plants, organ donation, organ transplants, black market even perhaps. Maybe there was something there. That's, again, my speculation as to why somebody might be trying to cover something up here. That's just my speculation. But you've laid out all of the amazing connections, and then you started laying out Bush connections. You started laying out other connections down there in Florida that I didn't even think about until today. When you started doing this research and turning up this dirt, were you as shocked as I am right now?
Yes.
So what do you think the deal is? Where do you think the connection here lies? Do you think, or do you think that this is just a coincidence that now not only Barrington Wisenhunt is no longer with us, but now also Peter Smith and Klaus Eberwein, who happen to be in the States?
I don't know what's going on.
I'm very emotional right now. I can honestly understand that. You know, the other day...
I'm just a lawyer here. I don't know what's going on.
I said on Twitter the other day when I heard about Peter Smith, I think that was Friday, immediately I started thinking about you and Jared because you guys are really sticking your neck out there. I mean, this is no joke, and this is happening right down the street from you. This isn't just happening in a foreign land. This isn't just happening in Haiti. This isn't just happening on a boat somewhere out at sea. Now this is happening just miles from your guys' offices. I mean, you're taking a serious leap of bravery here for coming on and revealing this information that you have that you've investigated for yourself. Again, no lies, all fact. What do you want the public to know? I mean, I know it's tough for you to gather yourself right now, but just what do you think the public needs to know right now? And where does this information need to go?
I would like the public to look into these matters, perhaps. I think they bear investigation. I think deaths are a serious matter. Mr. Barrington Wisenhunt was a friend of a friend. My friend told me to stay safe, and Mr. Barrington Wisenhunt passed away.
And our first guest this evening says stealing government secrets and then mishandling them amount to crimes. So is leaking classified material. Joining us tonight is Chris Farrell. He's the Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch. Chris, good to have you with us. Let's start with 7 memoranda, 4 of which contained classified information. At this point, leaking one of them, it's unclear, although the Columbia law professor says that there was no classified information in it. The fact that they were leaked in itself is a priori. Is it not a violation of federal record-keeping laws?
It absolutely is. You have a case where Mr. Comey absconded with U.S. government records. They were not his to take in the first place. Secondly, he probably is in a position, as was Mrs. Clinton, violating Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Section 793F, which is mishandling national defense information. I know this because I'm also a former special agent of Army counterintelligence, and I've done investigations precisely like the open question here. So Mr. Comey's in trouble. He essentially flaunted the fact that he he broke these rules and laws in his sworn testimony in front of the Senate. It's outrageous.
And as you listen to Senator Mark Warner there in Catherine Herridge's report, he sounds like a man working very hard to try to mitigate the circumstances of this event on behalf of the former FBI director.
You know, look, the then FBI director is in a private meeting discussing certain matters with the president. That right alone, right there, stop. The nature of that relationship and the communications that occurred, just by their essence, by the fact that it occurred itself, is 99% likely to be classified. It's not something that's going to be publicly discussed or openly acknowledged in the media, except when you have somebody like Comey who goes out and selectively leaks in order to damage the president.
Well, it's outrageous, no matter what else, the legal implications, whatever, for this man to have such grand illusions, if you will, of his himself and his prerogatives is, to me, extraordinary for anyone responsible for a federal law enforcement and counterintelligence agency.
And then, Lou, get this. Just think about it. So he goes in front of the Senate and makes this testimony. He then leaks, or had leaked, through his friend to the New York Times. We ask for the same records Judicial Watch does, and you don't know what we're told? No. And we have to sue to get them. So he can tell the Senate, he can leak it through his friend to the New York Times, but when we ask for it to explain to the American public what went on, we're told no, and we have to go into federal court to sue to get it.
And also the Senate Intelligence Committee itself has to, at the very least, I don't know if they've got them now, but ask for them and hope that apparently that the FBI director is feeling generous with his personal work product as he sees it, apparently. Not apparently, he said so, rather than a work product as of the FBI director when he was having those conversations with the President of the United States. I mean, this is extraordinary. Let me turn to Hillary Clinton in this circumstance. Why are we not hearing from a special counsel that looking into this situation of Russian collusion? Why aren't we hearing from the special counsel about her dealings with the Russians, her approvals that impact actually reserves of U.S. uranium that resulted, in fact, a transfer to a Canadian company with her approval and a speech for $500,000 by the former president, Bill Clinton? Why isn't that part of the Russian collusion investigation?
Precisely. If you're looking for collusion, look at Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton's speaking lists of the various places he ran around the world, 247 speeches netting $48 million, each of them approved by Cheryl Mills, not a single speech denied. If you want to look at collusion and foreign influence and using the Secretary of State position as an arm of or as an adjunct of the Clinton Foundation, look no further. I mean, you could spend the next...
Well, I want to look further, though, Chris.
Yes,
I want to look to John Podesta. I want to look to the Jewel Company and $35 million that they received and Podesta's connection to that enterprise. Why isn't that part of the collusion discussion or investigation?
Podesta was very cute with your colleague Maria Bartiromo when he said, well, I don't have any stock in any Russian company. Well, no, his holdings are actually in the Massachusetts incorporated U.S. affiliate of that Russian company. So, you know, Podesta likes to play it both ways. He's deeply involved with these Russian activities and companies, millions of dollars. His brother as well is involved in consulting with Russian entities. But they like to play word games, so when it parses language, it's more disgraceful behavior.
Pretty potent, isn't it? Welcome back to the Monthly Report Show. This month I'm trying to provide you with lots of evidence, video footage, along with my video, what would be commentary to discuss some of these variables. So, let's talk about the Russian collusion delusion. That is right. I've got a couple of notes here that I've written that I wanted to discuss. Ultimately, they're here somewhere. I just got to find them. Let's see here. Reach on over. Let's see what we got. Here we go. Okay. Ultimately, the Russia collusion delusion, 2016 elections. Isn't it interesting? Now, many of you remember, those of you that have been with me and known me for at least 2 years now, you remember 2 years ago was the Blaze the Dog incident, where individuals on the liberal left created a fake news scandal and story on me to try to take me out. That's right, politically. Talk about a conspiracy. That's right. Yes, I used the C word, and it's okay because don't worry, my credibility won't fade away on the show from using the C word. I'll use it again. Conspiracy. Ooh, I must be confident now. Ultimately, they launch a conspiracy fake news story scandal against me called Blaze the Dog, where they alleged and stated that I had a dog that was being abused, skin and bone, never had human interaction, so on and so forth. And they used this to try to drive a wedge between my supporters and voters and myself, and to make me look bad the year prior to running for Congress. So, but that didn't work out very well. It came back to bite them in the ass. It made it to where they couldn't even say or do a darn thing in the middle of my campaign, and they discredited not me, but themselves in the process by ultimately manipulating and lying to many of their own friends and family members, and that came back to bite them in the butt as people discovered, wait a minute, we don't like some of Kari's politics, but we really don't like it when someone that we're supposed to believe is lying to us and manipulating us to turn against Kari. So it had a real dramatic backfire in their face. So this pertains to what would be the president. They have stated, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and their cohorts, members of Congress even, including some Republicans, have stated that this particular president, what would be Donald Trump, and I want to make it clear, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I've only voted for a handful of Republicans in my whole life. I voted for way more Democrats throughout my life than I've ever had Republicans. So I want to make that perfectly clear. But fair is fair, what is right, and the truth is the truth. And I am going to put down all sides, all parties. I don't care if you're a conservative or a liberal Democrat. If you're in the wrong, I'm going to tell it to you. Just like recently, before I continue on with this Donald Trump factor of Russia collusion delusion, as I refer to it, ultimately, well, let's just go with that. Let's just stick to the task here. I don't want to digress too much. These individuals that went after the president stated that he colluded with Russia to steal what would be the election last year. They worked that for 7 months straight, and then about a month ago, they said, oh no, it's now obstruction of justice. Then that didn't pan out, so what did it become then? He's mentally ill. 25th Amendment. Impeach! Impeach! They say. Look, I didn't hear a peep about Barack Obama being impeached when I was trying to impeach his tail end as a president over the last several years. So the way I look at it, and by the way, I didn't even hear Republicans calling for impeachment. That's the sad part. Just like recently, I told Republicans too, I said, it's funny how many of you people, so-called conservative patriots, bitched and complained. You had all these special events. There's this guy named Anthony, had this big old gun event in Yakima, and boy, oh boy, people just sat around and talk about what they would do and what they should do, woulda, coulda, shoulda. 2 years later, well, we got a Republican Congress, Republican Senate, Republican President, and where the hell are you at now? Not looking so patriotic, are you? And it's interesting because I even see on all sides, things are beginning to break down, people. Even on the, it don't matter if you're on the conservative or the liberal side. A lot of you people, even the Libertarian Party event, said that they were losing numbers of what would be active registrations. What does this show, people? What does this mean? Here, allow me to break this down. Your constituents, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if you are Democrat, it doesn't matter if you're a Libertarian, Independent, or whatever, they're not very satisfied because they don't see a long-term variable that they can trust and believe in. Change you can believe in, that obviously fizzled out years ago. And here we are today. Now, Russia collusion delusion is nothing more than lies fake news, propaganda, and BS. It's meant to manipulate you, the voter, and the people to turn you against this president. Well, I didn't vote for President Trump, but I'll tell you what, I don't like it when people make up lies about a man. I don't like it. It's not right. So I will defend him because I feel it's my duty. And it's too bad that more of my own constituents across Washington State didn't look after and defend me too, when some of you knew that I was not abusing a dog. But that's okay. You and your businesses and families are now, well, got a noose around your neck more than you know. And you're going to become very desperate, many of you will, for real representation and leadership. And many of those folks out there right now that are living the delusion, drugs or escapism or this or that, things are getting ready to fizzle out, and you're going to be forced to come to the table and discuss a lot of these variables over the months ahead. Remember when my forecast used to tell you years and years from now? No, now I get to tell you over the weeks and months ahead. Now, what's going on right now is simple as this. We have active members of the government trying to perform what they call a coup d'etat. That's right. They are trying to overthrow, literally, our government. Trying to overthrow a duly elected president, lawfully elected president of the United States of America. That is illegal. That is illegal. Now, I'm glad to see President Trump and folks developing a special prosecution to go after Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, and others, Podesta, Weiserman Schultz. This needs to happen. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And now you are going to see over the months ahead, folks, that's right, over August and especially September, October, November, December, you are going to see the other side of the story. And I sure can't wait for many of my dear constituents, friends, opponents, and folks out there all across the world watching this show to be able to see the other side of the story. This is exciting. I've waited years and years. Actually, I've waited over a decade for this. So if I seem so ecstatic, like I just can't keep my words together, you know why. I'm very energized and I'm on the brink of major success and breakthroughs. God Almighty, thank God. So, and that's one thing too. Lately, people have noticed I've been talking about the Lord more. Well, I've always loved the Lord, but I've tried to be more secretive, or should I say, keep that stuff private. That's one of those things that, you know, kind of like dating or this or that. You don't really, you know, kiss and tell. You don't really want to, you know, tell all those fine issues, and it's nobody's business, really, quite frankly. But lately, I've seen such an ungodliness coming from many people in Washington State and all over. And so with so much darkness, bitterness, deceit, with so many people turning on themselves and each other, committing suicide, doing hard drugs. I mean, I see people picking, not just on each other, on yourselves. You're really hurting yourselves, people, more than you are anybody. So a lot of the stuff isn't working out. That's why so many people are depressed. I mean, I live just north of Seattle, 40 miles. Everybody around here was so lovey-dovey just 4 or 5 years ago. You walk up to a store, grocery store, somewhere, they were grabbing the door for you and arguing for you to go through the door first. Now people are picking on each other. And it's not just conservative to liberals. Oh no, I'm talking within their own same party, within the own same household. I'm seeing marriages out there beginning to rock harder than an Ozzy Osbourne concert. That's right. Speaking of Ozzy and the guitarist at the beginning. So, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. So, we have a witch hunt to take out this president. We have a coup d'etat. It's a very biased, fake news media that's telling you not just one side of the story, they're belligerently lying to you. That's right, they're telling you lies, folks. And you know, I mean, they fooled you before with Obama, many of you. And some of these people figure if they can fool you twice with 2 of those elections, well, hell, they can fool you 3 times with Russia collusion delusion, make you think you want Hillary Clinton. I mean, after they fool you 3 times, folks, I mean, Jesus, if I was one of these bad guys, I figured, hell, if we can fool you 3 times, we could probably pull off a scam 4, 5, 6, or 7. Hell, if you're going to be that dumb, no offense. It's time, people, to pull it together. It's time to be real. Some of these videos, some of my commentary, some of the stuff I discuss with many of these members, including some of political folks, even in the Libertarian Party, it's too much. Some of these people try to pretend they don't understand what I'm saying. Well, like I told a couple members lately, and I made it very clear. One of them tried to say, what'd she say? She said something about a tinfoil hat. Well, I took off my sunglasses as I was sitting on a couch enjoying a cold beverage on a summer day on this rooftop party building that we were at for this event. And I looked at her. I said, no. Wait a minute now. Look me in the eye and tell me, do you really, come on, do you honestly, really believe that? Tinfoil hat. And she did a double take and looked at me, and she knew that I knew that she knew better. And that's when she looked at me and said, Kari, that's what we love about you around here. And then she quickly, briskly left my presence as quickly as she could. That's reality. Reality is too much for many of you to handle. But let me tell you something about leadership. Your constituency wants a leader. They want guts. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? He has such a big mouth. He's politically incorrect. They say such bad things about him. So why did people vote for Donald Trump? Is it because everybody in this nation that's white is a bigot, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, sexist, and every other ist you can come up with? No. It's because they're tired of politicians. They want a guy that's blunt, like me, like Donald Trump. Many of the people that would have voted for Bernie did vote and jumped ship and went to Trump instead because they felt he was an honest man. It's not even about the policies, half of them now. People want somebody real, somebody that's honest, somebody that's not scripted. Like, for instance, I have a few talking points and notes on a piece of paper, but I'm not reading from a damn script here, folks. I'm talking to you from my heart. And I hope you'll listen. Because any of you that's known me for the last 10 years knows I've only been wrong on a handful of times. Literally, I've only been wrong like 3 or 4 times about things I've said. And I run my mouth a lot. I've already mentioned 100 things in this forecast alone, and I've only been wrong 4 times ever. So, by their deeds and by the past, you shall know them. I'm credible here. So the president is finally starting to kick some butt. We're 7 months into his administration. I don't agree with all of his policies. But I think that he means well, and you have to give him credit. Everything he said he was going to do on that campaign trail, he's working on, and he's committed to doing. He's working his ass off till 1:30 in the morning. He hardly even sleeps. He sleeps 3-4 hours a night at most. Appreciate that, people. He means well. He cares about your families. He's a rich man that actually still has the ability to relate and give a darn about you. So, moving on from Donald Trump and whatnot. But very interesting, the ties and the connections between the liberal left, how they came up with one story to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to try to take me down, and they're doing the same thing to Donald Trump. Russia collusion, Russia collusion, Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work, so it became obstruction of justice, obstruction of justice. That didn't pan out. Then it became he's mentally ill, he's this, he's that, he's the other. I mean, come on. Now it's to the point where the special investigator is looking into his children and family and extended family and business ties going back 10, 15 years ago. See, when you're looking into that, you are going on a witch hunt. You're not really looking to prosecute a president that deserves to be prosecuted. It's called, let's find something, anything. We're going to get dirt on him and we're going to make him look bad one way or another. That is the mission of what would be Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. At this point, he hasn't came up with jack shit. He has spent too many millions of your dollars hiring 16 attorneys, and it seems like 90% of them have donated. Is this funny? I follow the money. They're all Democrats. These are all people that are friends with and tied into the Democratic Party. He's finding a whole bunch of hitmen to join him to take out this president. So this is wrong. I'm going to stand up for my president. 17 intelligence agencies hoax that told you that Russia collusion was a factor. Well, here we go. Let's have a head intel chief let you know it's not 17. I guess it's now just 3. We'll catch you back after this break. Seeing is believing.
This on the 6th of January, there were 4 of us, meaning the directors of NSA, FBI, and CIA, and myself. That's all. And we explained who did the report. So how this narrative got out there about 17 components being involved, I don't know. But the report itself makes it clear that it was the 3 agencies plus the Office of Director of National Intelligence that put this intelligence community assessment together.
Are headed in terms of the efforts to unseat our president. It's very important to understand exactly who Robert Mueller, the special counsel, colloquially called a special prosecutor, is. But above all, it's important to understand that Mr. Mueller was appointed solely on the authority and the direction of acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, meaning he was not appointed either at the direction of the president nor at the direction of the president's Attorney General, former Senator Jeff Sessions. Sessions recused himself from the entire Russian matter, in my opinion, unwisely, and evidently to the consternation of the president, who was unaware that that recusal was coming. We'll look at Mr. Rosenstein in just a moment, but first let's look at Mr. Mueller. This fellow was appointed, as I say, by Rosenstein. Mr. Mueller was James Comey's immediate predecessor as the FBI director, and he was appointed to that position by George W. Bush when he replaced his deputy. That wasn't the first time Mr. Comey and Mr. Mueller's paths would cross. In fact, I think it would be fair to call them cronies. We now know, incredibly, that Mr. Mueller met with and coached Mr. Comey before his Senate testimony in recent days, in which he falsely accused the president of obstruction of justice. We also know, historically, that Mr. Mueller has been a hitman and executioner for both the Clintons and the Bushes, proving that he is a loyal soldier of the deep state and the neocons who have dominated both parties essentially for the last 30 years. It was only recently that I was reminded that it was Mr. Mueller who removed all of the anti-Islamic terrorism information from the FBI's training manuals. So he is politically correct and has been part and parcel of the efforts within both the Bush and Clinton administrations to lay down to radical Islam. It is not just a question of Mr. Mueller's intention. Now we know that he is actively hiring Obama-era appointees from the Justice Department to aid in his investigation of the president. What is there to investigate? The facts are known. Legal scholars across the spectrum have made it clear that there is no obstruction of justice. So what gives? It's very simple. Mr. Mueller is determined to bring a charge of obstruction against the president regardless of the facts and regardless of the fact that he has no case. Having failed with his friends at the NSA and the CIA and the others in the intelligence community to make a case for Russian collusion to assist Donald Trump, a scandal for which there is still not to this day an iota of evidence that would hold up in American court of law, we now conjure this phony obstruction as a triggering point for the zanies in the left wing of the Democratic Party, bolstered by Mr. Soros, to trigger the insurrection on the ground, to destabilize the government and seek to remove Donald Trump in the kind of frenzy we saw surrounding the fall of President Richard Nixon.
And if he's fired by Mr. Trump, or if he's attempted to be fired by Mr. Trump, I really hope that our members of Congress, our elected representatives, are going to stand up and say enough is enough, and stop making apologies and excuses for things that are happening that really flout, I think, our system of laws and government here.
When you say enough is enough, if he's fired, and he's the President of the United States, he could tell Rosenstein to fire him if he wants. But if he's fired, what would you want Congress to do?
First of all, I think it's the obligation of some executive branch officials to refuse to carry out some of these orders that, again, are inconsistent with what this country is all about. But I would just hope that this is not going to be a partisan issue, that Republicans, Democrats are going to see that the future of this country is at stake, and there needs to be some things done for the good of the future.